Welcome to this special edition of Happy Hour Holidaze with your host here every week, Manny Febre, and your co-host, Sean Febre. Today, you're in for a real treat. We're going to do a little bit of a debate on certain topics when it comes to politics. In studio today, we got Republican entrepreneur and founder, Christians for Cannabis, Nate Jurewicz. What's up, Nate? How you doing?
What's going on? I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And then we got another repeat offender, Steve Fantetti, your corporate attorney, business, all kinds of stuff. He's fantastic, and we're really happy to have both of them on. This is going to be a fun one. We're really excited for this episode. We've been looking forward to it. Sean is going to be the moderator for the debate, and he's going to commence right about now.
All right. So just a couple ground rules, which we went over off air, just so the audience knows, there's going to be no interruptions. You allow your opponent to complete a full thought and no personal attacks. So let's start with this one. Given differing views on taxation and government spending, Nate, how do you propose to tackle inflation and boost job growth?
I mean, it's such a fully loaded question. I mean, there's so many things going wrong under the Biden administration. We keep printing money and sending it to Ukraine. We keep printing money and sending it to Israel. The gas prices are going up. It's a mess, taxes need to be lowered, for the average Joe. I'm not one of those that thinks that only the rich should pay taxes and that's it. But with the current tax system and the history of the IRS from 1913, we need a whole new system, and the government needs to be held more accountable on their spending. I mean, I just saw a recent viral video of, it was either a congressman or a senator holding up a bag of washers, or it was I forgot what it was. Washers? Did you see that video?
No, I haven't seen it.
And he's like, "Yeah, the government billed $90,000 for this."
Oh shit! So I did see that actually. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we just keep printing money and gas prices keep going up, housing keeps going up, gallon of milk keeps going up, food keeps going up, like, when does it all end?
So what's the solution?
We have to figure out a way to get back on the gold standard. I don't know if that's possible or not, but, under the Nixon administration, Nixon was the one that got us off of the gold standard to begin with. And back then, you could be a shoe salesman, you could have a house, you could have a wife, you could have 2 kids, a white picket fence. You could send them to college. You could send them to private schools and still be able to retire comfortably. Now, the average house is $500,000. So if they lower rates, that's just going to inflate even more. If they raise rates, that's going to make it go lower. We're probably going to see 45-year mortgages. What is the solution? We need better people in office. We have to get rid of the PACs. First of all, the politicians are all accepting too much money for donations over $1,000 for a congressman. They can basically get bought off and work for a corporation just because of the PACs. We need to have 2-term limits, and everyone in office needs to be more accountable on our spending, because right now we have no idea where it goes. It goes to the CIA, it goes to the FBI. Those institutions are not our friend, at least not lately. So
great point of view. Steve, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think Nate made a couple good points. I didn't hear any solutions, but I think we have the solution already. I think the Biden administration put in the new infrastructure bill for a reason, and it stemmed mostly from the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that's what the government's proposed solution for inflation is, at least to head it off in the short run. There's no question. I think the U.S. has spent too much on foreign wars, and it hasn't focused enough on putting enough of its attention back home here in the United States to help do things like building infrastructure. They have the new Chips and Science Act, which is going to help building microchips and things back home, kind of focusing more on America first. I think that got lost for a while. But I mean, they do have to get inflation under control. And I think that this new law that Biden passed is actually going to help. And again, you can't fight inflation in a day. You can't fight it in a year. And there's too many externalities that go against inflation. And again, we can't keep printing money, but at the same time, I think that the new act is going to help put more money into the pockets of Americans. Because anytime you put an Inflation Reduction Act or something similar to it into effect, you're gonna have trickle down effects that end up stimulating growth. So jobs get created, right? You start creating different industries, right? Generally, we outsource chips to China or India or other places in the world, right? But if we start doing these things here in America and we can start being known for those, well, then that's going to start helping people get money in their pockets because there's jobs, because there's more purchasing power, right? There's more money out in the economy that's floating around, and we're printing less of it. And so again, is it perfect? No. Has the Biden administration done a great job on inflation? No, but at least they've done something. And so I think those are solutions, and they're practical, and history's taught us that those things work. So I think we got to give it some time and see how it goes. And I think we'll end up in the place we ultimately want to be. I think rates will drop. I think the price of borrowing money will be a lot easier. And with that, home prices can kind of flatten out. The rates on taxes will broaden the base, and then people can start being able to put more money in their pockets, like I said, and spending power increases. And that's what you want to see from an infrastructure bill. That's what you want to see from a inflation statute, anything like that. I think we're going to see all those things come true.
That's all very good points, man.
Thank you.
If I could respond. So the Inflation Reduction Act, I haven't actually read the bill, but I assume...
Nobody in Congress has.
Okay.
Just kidding.
So
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Probably true. So isn't the Inflation Reduction Act just printing more money and giving it to someone? Where is it? Is that what's happening?
Is that a direct question? I'll answer.
Yeah,
it.
I'm asking.
Interrupt your time.
Yeah.
No, it's not actually what it does. I think there's
they're
part.
They're not printing any money.
Well, no, I don't want to say no. What I would do to answer your question, I'll keep it short so you can get back to your point, is just that it's a commitment over time to allocate tax funds, right, to certain directed programs in the United States. It's not like we're going to print $3 billion today, right? You can't do that, right? That's going to create the U.S. dollar will be completely out of control.
Apparently, you can do that because they are doing that, but
not for a statute like
but
this.
Not for that. Okay,
correct. So what you have to do is you have to allocate money to programs over a certain period of time, and as you do that, the allocations in the spend clauses. I haven't read the whole bill either, but parts of it. And what those clauses state is you have to see specific impacts and effects in each directed spending venture that you allocate funds to. And if you're seeing the yields and production from them, then they'll allocate more money to them. So again, just because you hear $3.1 billion invested into the new infrastructure statute or into the Inflation Reduction Act, all they're saying is it's a commitment. They're not saying we're going to guarantee come out and just spend all this money right now, because that just wouldn't be rational and reasonable, and we don't have it. Right, we got a $34 trillion deficit in the United States, so we can't continue.
How is that ever going to get paid off?
Exactly, and so you can't, just make broad commitments. That's why I think smart, rational solutions like the infrastructure statutes, like the Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration's put in, I think those are good common sense solutions. Like any other, political statutes or laws should be common sense. I think this is going to get us there. But again, is it perfect? No, but you have to be doing something. And to answer your question more directly, you're not printing it all at once. You're allocating accordingly and seeing what the results yield. And that's what matters.
Okay. So kind of seems like we touched on a lot of points there. All right, let's get to, let's say, climate change, because I know this is kind of a big one.
Ooh,
Do you think that the government should be playing a larger role in addressing climate change if climate change is real? And how does it reflect your values?
Who's that directed to?
Yeah. To you.
You go first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think
because then you go next, and then you get a chance to rebuttal. Yeah, exactly.
I think the government does play a role in climate change. I think the government's played a role in climate change for a long time. I think once the Clean Water Act was passed by Nixon in the 70s, that Americans started realizing, that climate change, is real. I think there's debates over the impact that it has. I think every year when the sun shines hotter or there's less drought, people start questioning whether or not the impacts of climate change are real, and they think it has to be consistent, that we have to see downturns every single year. Now there are. I mean, we've seen them over time that, there's less snow in certain parts of the winter, or the temperatures of the earth have increased over time. I mean, that's definitely going to happen. But I think the government acknowledging that it's something we have to care for, number one, is important. But what I want people to understand too is that it's not something that the U.S. government can handle alone. It's a global problem, right? You have to get support from around the world. And we've gotten it from France and other countries. And we have people that push back, like China or Russia, because they want to have no emission standards, right? And we try to implement emission standards here. The Biden administration tried to cap and put more emission standards in play 2 years ago. And they're continuing to try to do that. But I think the government's role is twofold. One, I just stated, it's to have support from around the world because it is a global issue. One country can't do it alone. And I think the second thing is you have to make sure that you're investing, and I don't just mean money. You have to be investing in the future of clean alternative energy sources. And I think the U.S. is doing that. And I think if it takes the lead, other countries will follow. There's countries, that are even more advanced than us in certain phases and aspects of alternative energy technologies. I just don't think they have the political will or the government systems in place to make them thrive. And I think the U.S. does. And so if we continue to put money, and again, this is part of the infrastructure bill, was to make sure that we can have higher technical networks, we can track storms better, if we can start finding alternatives to fossil fuels, that we can use our education platform to educate people early, not on just what climate change is, but on jobs that are going to be needed to help fight climate change. Because, like I said, you can bring the awareness to it, you can try to rally support worldwide, but if you don't have real tangible solutions, like showing you're training your people through education, you're creating classes and opportunity for people to learn how to work in the new alternative, fossil fuel world, then only then will you be able to actually do something. So I don't think the government's sitting still doing nothing. I don't think it ever has. I just think it's trying to grow the platform of what it can actually show can be done versus just talking about it.
Nate, what is your take on that issue?
So I think, first of all, I'm pro-environment. I drive a hybrid car. I don't think we should just get rid of all gas cars. I think you should let the free market decide what people want and decide if they want to buy solar, if they want to buy an electric car, if they want to buy wind for their, house or whatever, and, have a, well balance of everything. But as far as climate change, everything that I have researched and seen, I'm not like a total believer in all of it. Like, it seems like they're trying to implement a lot of this so they can implement the carbon tax, so they can basically tax us on the air we breathe, in addition to our properties, in addition to our income, and so in addition to everything that we buy. It's getting a little bit out of hand. And like all that money that was sent to the Paris Accord that Trump pulled us out of, I think that was a good move. Like, if the people that, because you always seem to have deep state actors, literal actors, always pushing this climate agenda all in like unison. So like, if they really believed it and they really believed that the ocean was going to rise, why does Obama live in a $10 million house on the ocean? Why are the banks giving loans for oceanfront property? You think the people in the high up at the banks don't know what's really going on? So I just don't totally buy all of it. And a lot of that stuff is funded by George Soros as well, which none of us like. So
are you saying that you want less intervention from the government, less government spending?
Yeah, I don't want the government. I don't want it to get to the point where the government's charging us some carbon tax on the air that we breathe. I think that the you can certainly have certain years that are slightly hotter and certain years that are slightly lower. But I mean, everyone's so anti-gasoline. God made gasoline for a reason, I believe. So,
Steve, do you have a rebuttal?
No, I respect his position, even though I may not agree with it 100%. I don't think the government's meddling in climate change to create a tax situation. I think, if anything, that's going to stifle innovation and growth and businesses having more money in their pocket to even fight the problem. So I don't see that as being the issue. I just think, I don't want to speak for Nate, but I think maybe there's Republicans that believe that the government is pushing climate change as an agenda, as a way to exert a certain type of control. I just don't think that's true. I think there's data out there in real science that shows that if there's certain portions of our planet, that are susceptible to weakness if we don't handle aspects of climate control, that there could be issues for the future of our, population. And so I don't think that's something we should ignore. I think that's actually us being prudent, right, as a society. I mean, we all live in Florida. This could be one of the first places underwater if what Nate's saying is true,
Yeah.
right, or not. So, I think it's important. I think there's been data out there that shows that the desalinization of the water is a problem, as there's more Arctic shelf melting that happens up in the Arctic. That's going to trickle down, and it creates, right, ocean rising. It stops the cycle of how the convection currents work from South America all the way up to the Arctic Circle. And so if that slows down, that alone causes a change in climate that can be dramatic enough where we may not be able to live in certain parts of the world. And so I think it's never a bad idea to think that these things are possible and true. And I just think ignoring them is probably the wrong play.
Let's take us out.
Okay. Well, we'll be right back, and we'll continue with these different topics. We're really enjoying it. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be right back. Thank you. And we're back. to the political debate here in studio on Box News.
Box
Just fucking with you guys. All right, so Sean was going to go with the next topics at hand, and we're going to get a little bit more combative on this. We're going to get physical, vocally.
Given opposing viewpoints from parties, whether it be Democrat or Republican, immigration seems to have a very large. We have a very large problem with immigration. I saw somewhere that 10 to 15,000 illegals are coming in to this country per day. That stat I haven't verified, but it was a number around that. Do you think immigration was better under Trump than it is currently under Biden? And do you see Biden doing anything to fix the problem or just letting it occur? And if he's letting it occur, why do you think he's letting it occur?
I mean, with the immigration problem, everyone's just like, open borders, just let anyone in. Like, we have to get back to reality. The reality is you have cartel members that are trafficking children, going across the border, posing as a family, and then God knows what happens to those poor children. So just because, we're America doesn't mean we should be idiots and just let anyone in. So I agree with Trump when he says we should build a wall and have people come in legally. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got to fix some of the bureaucracy in that, but I think that we should let the cream of the crop in based on merit, and I don't think that we should have all of these criminals going across the board. I don't know what percentage of them are cartel and what percentage of them are just people trying to get a better life in America. But I think Trump did a better job, although he couldn't get the whole wall built in 4 years because of Congress and everyone else. Oh, $8 billion, that's too much for the wall, but let's go send it to Ukraine over here. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think that because of population collapse, you have, abortion, the food that they're poisoning us, the pharmaceutical drugs that are poisoning us, the vaccines are probably going to end up making everyone sterile. So I think one theory that a lot of people think is the reason why they're doing it is because of population collapse and voting, because those people are going to vote more Democrat than Republicans because the Democrats are just telling them what they want to hear. They're getting better benefits than our own people. I was talking to someone else about the African American community. They don't like it. They're not down with this. All these illegal immigrants coming in and getting better government benefits and handouts than they are, and they're from another country. So it's a mess. We definitely need to build a wall. That's not going to fix everything, though. There's still going to be problems because the reality is we live in a broken world.
Good answer. Steve, how do you feel on the topic?
Well, I'm originally from Ontario, Canada, and I came into the United States, so I'm a little maybe biased on immigration. Obviously, I like immigration. I don't like completely open borders, though. I'm probably with Nate on this, and I think America has to get the immigration, if you want to call it crisis, under control. I think it is important to understand from a baseline approach that America needs immigration. I think having more cross sections in races and cultures in America has always been good for America. I think we've seen that from the beginning of time. So I don't think there's a reason to slow that down. But it can't be out of control because I think, and Nate pointed to some of those issues where, there's unintended consequences that happen that are very negative when you don't have control at the border, right? And whether it's drug cartels or whether it's sex trafficking or whether it's just people coming in, with any type of checks on them or balances, catch and release only works for so well. It's really all the Trump administration was really doing. They couldn't finish the wall. I think Manafort and those guys were stealing the money, right? So they couldn't get enough of the money to finish the wall. So I think that was a problem too. I don't think it was Congress necessarily allocating all the funds, but understand that the president alone can't unilaterally create legislation, right? That's going to handle this problem. It's got to be a bipartisan effort, right? And I think the only way that's going to happen is if there's an agreement somewhere on what the criteria are every time that the border has individuals coming in. Because I think the Biden administration's already put in some type of impacts on if there are individuals who come in through illegal means from immigration, right? They have a process right now where they process the claims, and they were trying to do catch and release like Trump was, but it wasn't working because the numbers were too high. And so Biden's recent, I think it was in 2022, he put in a stopgap measure that said, look, if we can pause the processing of new claims and finish the ones we have already processed for immigrants, that's more common sense because at least we're processing everybody. Like Nate said, it's more about merit and what they can do to help the economy here. I think those measures alone are enough. Why we can't figure that out, I don't know. And by we, I mean a country. And so definitely need to close the borders, definitely need to pause claims. And I don't mean close them completely, but I mean close them to when we have too many claims being processed, we have to slow the influx of the inflow, right?
It sounds like both of you agree on this topic, actually.
If I could just make one point. So when you came from Canada, did you go across take your family across the
I came alone by myself.
Okay. You came across legally, or did you just run across the border?
No, I drove. I got a 96 Ford Taurus with no air conditioning. So I drove.
Right, it was a wagon, like the Oregon Trail.
It was a horse on in front of it.
You came across legally?
Yeah, I get your point. 100% I did.
So because when people talk about...
And that's how it should be.
Right, absolutely. When people talk about immigration, I think that there's people think that Republicans are like, oh, no immigrants because we're racist. It's like, that's not what we're saying. We're saying immigrants coming illegally and immigrants coming legally. I'm all for immigrants coming legally based on merit, so that we don't have a bunch of criminals destroying our towns.
Well, don't put it in a box. I was going to say, I don't want to interrupt you, and I think I didn't say this, and I probably should have. Is that you can't look at immigration as like black or white. It's not everybody coming over is bad, or everybody comes over and that's a problem. It's you have to look at the different situations and reasons why people are coming over, right? Mm-hmm. They could be coming from a humanitarian crisis in a country, which we know South America right now has a lot of unstable governments, whether it's Guatemala or several other countries. People have nowhere else to go. And so the question is, what kind of country do we want to be and how many people do we let in? Then you have situations where parents and children have to be separated or not. And then what's your immigration rule going to be on that? So you can't make a black and white rule, and immigration isn't black and white. Oh, it's just people coming over and that's the problem. No, you have to really decipher and break down the different situations and circumstances and then allocate rules to each one. And I think we failed at that. I think a lot of times people get overly passionate negatively about immigration and saying, look, the fact that people are coming over, they're all criminals or they're wrong. And I'm not speaking just as Donald Trump, but I mean, a lot of other senators and people in Congress have said this. And so I think the sooner we can break down the different situations and make more rules for each situation, that's going to make immigration more tolerable because you can tackle it one at a time. You can't tackle it as one big black and white issue.
Nate, you had a rebuttal to that?
No.
Oh, no.
No, what I was going to say is, when it comes to the immigration, I mean, they're also not paying any taxes. So the middle class is having weight on all the taxes that we're paying to make sure that they're still having everything that we have. I mean, we're working hard as well. We want to make sure that they're paying their taxes, coming in here legally because, hey, our family came over here from Cuba, but they went through the process and now they're paying taxes to help out, add value to the United States as well. So, and then also, I mean, there's a lot of immigrants coming that are military age. We also don't want to have too many people from different countries where now we're the minority and we have a pack of people that can turn on the whole United States as well. So for me, I just think there's got to be a limit here. And that's fine if they want to do the claims and go slow. But at the same time, we got to make sure that if we stop the claims, then we got to put a pause on how many people we're bringing in as well.
Manny just joined the debate.
I'll tell you what, though, I don't think, number one, I think the goal is eventually, and that's why we talked earlier about processing claims, pausing of claims so you can process the ones that are in front of you, especially a lot of ones that are very good and can yield production. I think the goal is to get them to be able to pay taxes. A lot of them can't. A lot of them don't have the education. They can't speak the language. So I think we have to be sensitive and respectful of that as a country. I think our country was founded on that basis. And I also think that I don't want to challenge you too much on this, but I want you to understand is that I think a lot of immigrants who end up coming to the United States, whether they get here legally, illegally, or they go through the process even coming from illegal ways, but they get processed legally. Yeah. They do end up serving in the military. And I think it's good to have a lot of different cultural components to our military. I think that helps because we can now have people who can speak different languages. We have to fight in foreign wars. or we have people who have different, walks of life. They can deal with people who are at a civilian level if we have to go and help out and assist in different countries. So I think it's a positive more negative.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to take a shot at you. I just letting you know I see that a little differently.
Let's switch gears over
Wait,
here.
hold on one second here. Because when he said that, they're not educated or they don't speak the language, there's plenty of manual labor jobs that you don't need to speak the language. You just got to know how to dig a hole or do landscaping, whatever it is. So
I disagree with that.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be educated or speak the language in order to have a job. There's plenty of jobs here where you don't need to speak the language.
I don't disagree with that one point in full, but in part. And here's why. You're not looking at the full picture. They might be able to show up somewhere and grab a shovel, let's say, and dig a ditch.
Okay.
But you're forgetting about what they do when they're off the clock. So how can they function in society after that? You have to have education, do all the other things besides digging a ditch.
I don't know about, I mean,
So
what
it's
kind
all
what
right,
kind of
now we're
education
shifting.
are we
Now we're
talking about?
shifting here.
But it's important
I'll
to
just
think
say,
about.
I'll just say one thing. We'll close
It's
it out with.
important.
Yeah,
You gotta
let's
be able
close out this
you have to know how
topic
to
here.
use the currency,
It's
write your name, fill out forms. All those things
They all
are
have
important.
one, two.
Google
or
Translate.
$5.
Google
$10.
Translate.
It's
You guys
very
are awful.
it's-
They close out the topic.
Okay,
Close
it's-
out the topic
it's-
here.
this is all fun and games, with the very people get heated on both sides of this because they feel very strongly about it. But it's all fun and games until your daughter gets raped. I mean, we have to be careful.
Damn, we went deep there.
Yeah, we're
Like,
dark
it's not
sided.
like
He asked you to close it out.
Dark side.
So-
So this is more tangential to the immigration reform and more so pivoting towards veteran homelessness. Why is it that our veterans who fought and some of them died for our country are treated poorly in regards to new illegal immigrants being able to get a hotel in New York and their room is paid for in California, their room is paid for, and you have homeless veterans living in the streets? Why is that okay?
It's not. I don't know who that question is directed to. Directed to me.
he goes first.
Oh, he goes
He goes
first.
first.
It's directed to you.
Sorry, I lost track.
Yeah.
Once Manny jumped in, I forgot who.
That's
I
hard.
love Manny
Yeah.
stirring the pot. No, listen. I mean, everything you said is right.
My name's Jimmy on this podcast.
That's right. I forgot about that. That's an absolute problem, and
How do we fix that?
it's a crisis, in my opinion. I mean, look, I think there's steps being taken already. I know the Biden administration recently passed legislation that allows now. They've saved 8 years on waiting periods for processing of veteran benefits and claims, which is important. They've also made sure that you can process more short-term claims to get insurance benefits as a veteran. So before, if you were going to get them, you had to be locked in for like 2 or 3 years on whatever was afforded to you. So whatever you received in terms of the benefit compensation, you had to keep that for 2-3 years. Well, now they shorten it on a 3-4 month period, which means that for 3 or 4 months, if you don't like it or it's not working, you can reapply to another one, and you don't have to wait several years on a backlog to get them. So I think that's a good start. Does that solve it? No. But we have to be doing something because our veterans deserve better. And really, they should be treated at the top of the food chain in terms of what they should be receiving and getting for what they've done for the country. So that's a start. Is there more? Yes. And I don't have an answer as to why they're not being prioritized, because they should be. If it's a lack of funds, well, take funds from somewhere else, because the veterans deserve it and need it, than other things that we're spending money on. I mean, we have a lot of wasteful spending in the United States of America. And I think both parties are guilty of that. I'm not just going to say one over another. So I think chipping into that and finding ways to allocate funds towards this issue, like the bill that was recently passed to help veterans get claims processed, is a good start and what we need to be doing more of.
Nate, what's
Yeah, I
your
pretty much agree with everything he said.
Not much of a debate over here, man.
You got to ask
I mean,
different questions.
the deep state government
I got one.
that has all of these puppets in Congress and Senate, they just don't care about the vets. So they just allot a little bit of money for them. It's not enough. These guys have got PTSD, they're bipolar schizophrenia. Like, they've been through hell. They've seen God knows what, and we're not taking care of them. So I'm usually, in this debate, I'm usually for less spending, less spending, less spending. But for that particular issue, I think we should give them more.
And honestly, from my experience with buddies that have been in the military, I mean, these guys come back, and it doesn't even have to be during a war period. They come back very, they're not normal.
Different.
They've seen some
The
shit.
vet-
And even just, using a fucking bathroom in front of a whole plot in the middle of Iraq. I mean, you're still digging a hole, whatever it is. These guys, it's different than living in normal society. They need a way to transition into normal society again. And there needs to be programs or some sort of help there to make sure that they can come back and get a job and get out of that mindset that everybody's out to get you when you're out there in the middle of
Do you think there are any in place right now?
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Assistance?
Yeah, I'm sure there
I think there are too, but they need to be better.
They needed to be better because even people we've had on this podcast that were former military vets, they tell us, that transition from being in the military, everything is planned from the time you wake up until you go to sleep. And then you come into society where, hey, you have freedom of time now. Now there's no itinerary. You got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this. I think the most common sense first step in that, if they're not already doing it, they may already be doing it. The way some things get handled, I don't think it's being handled this way, is those who have been there and fought over time to reintegrate into society after living from the military life back into civilian life, they're the ones that should be setting the rules because they know what it's like. They've lived it, right? Asking someone in Congress who's never fought a war or is sitting comfortably every day to understand how to reintegrate in society, it's just the wrong people making those decisions.
They don't know, man.
So I think the guidance should be coming more. If it's not already happening, again, I'm not saying it's not because I don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, I think if it was happening, I think we'd see more improvements. And I think that's what would help because they would know better of what they need, how long it's going to take, right? How we can inflate programs to be able to produce more value to assist veterans as they come back from fighting.
I think that the VA hospital should be giving cannabis to the vets instead of opiates.
I agree with that. I mean, the pills are.
I think that.
Let's actually hold that thought, Nate, because when we get back, that was going to be my next question. Okay. So when we get back, we'll pivot to marijuana. So we're back with Happy Hour Holidaze debate, and this is actually a marijuana question. We're on you first now, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about cannabis? And to follow up, how do you think the government and all our elected officials should be handling legalization?
Well, this is a big question for me. This is a big subject. I grew up in the church on the right. I'm a pastor's kid. Parents met at Bible college. When I was 15, I was diagnosed with a very serious back condition. So it's called spondylolisthesis. Most people's spines are like this. Mine's like this. So I'm always in chronic pain. That was diagnosed when I was 15. I'm 43 now. When I was about 27, I realized and started learning about cannabis being an actual medicine because growing up and then in my early 20s, no one ever talked about that kind of stuff.
Reefer madness.
Right. So it's been a big issue for me because it gives me pain relief and it's a great alternative to opiates, which will kill you. If you go to most of the churches these days, the pastors will.
Manny.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
The pastors will. They'll speak out against marijuana, but then when it comes to someone in their congregation that has some kind of illness or issue or chronic pain, if they go to their doctor and get an opiate, that's all of a sudden okay. So the culture, especially the Christian culture, the culture on the right, they need to wake up to the medicinal effects of cannabis and realize why God made it. Now, legally, where the legalization is going is twofold. It's good because, in most of the states, we have either medical or full recreational, which is great. But the bad thing is the spoiled politicians who really most of them have never known what it's like to experience lack. Their parents got them into Harvard, Stanford, they got into fraternity, mommy and daddy's connections, got them into Congress, got in the Senate. So like when you tell them about these issues, like with the vets, what we were talking about earlier, like they just have no idea and they're just signing a form or voting on a bill that they never even read. So if we just do nothing and let cannabis alone, it will eventually be legalized federally. But if we do that, the whole industry is going to be handed over to the big corporate cannabis companies. Whereas if we're more active and, we're, making sure that our politicians, all the constituents are calling their congressman, calling their state rep, calling their state senator, calling their, their governor, and making it so that the market is more of a free market. Because right now, like in Florida, for example, we had Amendment 2, the medical amendment, like 5 years back, and 22 companies, initially 7 companies got their license, and then it's 22. Now it's cut off. No one can get their license to sell. Also, these big companies spray their stuff with pesticides. We actually got a video of someone that was in a True Leaf grow that had all this mold growing in their stuff. People were getting sick. Then they're reporting it to the Florida Department of Health. The Florida Department of Health is so corrupt under the Wilton Simpson administration. His right-hand woman, Kathy Mears, she deleted all of those records. And
Allegedly.
And True Leaf.
Allegedly.
Well, I mean,
You won't make that allegation.
I can tell you my source is Holly Bell, who used to be the right-hand person for Nikki Fried. She's the one that gave me all this information, and she used to work there in, I think it was Kathy Mears' position, so she knows. So it's just a mess. The True Leaf, Cure Leaf, and Move, those are 3 big cannabis dispensaries in Florida, and a prison company have been lobbied to shut down the hemp industry, because you've got you got some states get full recreational, and then you've got Florida, which has medical, and then we also have hemp. So if it's hemp-derived cannabis, which was into effect because Trump signed the hemp bill in 2018, more people can participate in the business. It's not vertically integrated. So what that means, like with True Leaf, they have to grow, cultivate, and retail everything. So they got to have stores, they got to have farms, they got to have a big operation. You need like $100 million and political connections to get a license. And even if you have that, you probably still won't get one at this point. So the hemp industry is horizontally integrated. So this guy can grow, this guy can wholesale to this guy can retail to this guy. And all these small to medium-sized mom and pop businesses, the smoke shops, the Kratom Lounge, the Kava Lounges, the hemp dispensaries as well, can participate in the industry, and the people don't have to have a medical card to buy. So it's been great for the last few years, or since 2018, where we've had that legal hemp industry that Nikki Fried did a great job implementing. The problem is Nikki Fried got too big for her britches. She was the first Democrat I ever voted for, honestly. And she's like, I got to run for governor against DeSantis. So she goes whooping around the streets with a rainbow flag in the red, purple state of Florida, thinking that's going to win. And she got destroyed. So that left her seat open. This rhino, Wilton Simpson, gets in. Last year, True Leaf sends him $275,000. He holds a press conference that shows black market hemp products that I've never seen in stores. My job what I do as a job is I'm a rep for one of the fastest growing hemp companies in Florida, and I've been in 1,000 stores. I've never seen these products that Wilton Simpson's displaying, and he's like, they're selling to the children. So it's like knockoff of like Skittles and gummy bear packaging, that kind of thing. So we have to regulate this. So those are all black market products, and he's blaming and penalizing the stores that got their license legally and trying to do everything legit. And
so to be concise.
Yep. I got one more point.
Okay.
So that happened last year. They almost made it illegal. It didn't happen. This year, the state and the House have criminalized most all hemp products except for CBD and Delta-9 products in 50 milligram cases, containers only. That's going to drastically affect the industry. And the reason why they're doing it is because there's 9,400 hemp businesses and there's only 22 hemp dispensaries. So just what's happening in Florida is we have to be more politically engaged so that we have a free market, because there's so much stuff about this plant that we don't even know. Israel, the Holy Land, is the leader on scientific research. And a lot of the Christians and the Christian
let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Man. You've been going for 7 minutes.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Steve.
Sure.
I forgot you were here.
Sorry.
I try not to interrupt. That's a lot of good information.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Nate's position that he's pro marijuana and doesn't see any issues on having it become fully legalized.
That's not what he's.
No, I'm asking him.
Right.
Right.
I want it fully legalized,
There
but
you
I
go,
want
yeah.
a free market legalized.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
No, so because I don't know if you saw lately, I know President Biden put forward a proposal for a new bill that's going to declassify under the CDSA, the Controlled Drug Substances Act, marijuana's classification to be reduced. So it's
From
not a Schedule 1 narcotic,
That's
correct,
good.
to reduce it. So that's going to help. That's going to help with, obviously, number one, violators who are in prison for drug crimes related to marijuana, and they probably shouldn't. And so hopefully that's going to help offset that problem, and I'll offset taxes and things that are going to putting those people in prisons. That'll help free up some capital. So that's good. Number two, I do think that it's important that the government's looking at marijuana being declassified so that it can be sold and there's a free market for it. What I am worried about is maybe two quick things. One is I do hope before the government takes this step that they're talking about things that Nate was, which is regarding, I don't think the government wants this to become too privatized. I think they need to take control of it because it could get out of control. I know the government wants the tax revenue from marijuana. I know that's one of the big reasons why they want to declassify it, because that's going to free up a lot of capital. I would like to see a law that if they do get tax revenue from this, it has to all go towards paying down the national debt because it's getting out of control. That'd be great. They can do it. But I also think there's benefits that the government's got to focus on if they're going to do this. I think number one, I saw the administration proposed that they would now allow for, because right now I guess you can't under the current laws, marijuana companies can't write off certain aspects or business expenses from their business under the tax code because it's not a nationally recognized federal law that it's allowed to be sold marijuana on every single level. And so I think those are things that will start helping small businesses to be able to take advantage of this if it does become decriminalized and more legal. And also, again, controlling the free market, but there's got to be control. So I hope before anything happens that the government does, because we don't want too much government, right? We all know that. But there's got to be some central control over how this market's going to be run, because there's going to be tax revenue from it. That's a positive. But what are the unintended consequences that we're not thinking about in terms of how it's sold, who it's sold to, where it's coming from, what is in it? We all know what happens with other types of drugs. I think we all know opium, fentanyl, all these other things that have happened, right? So we don't want these other things to spiral from this. So I don't want the government to move too fast if they haven't thought about all these other things. So again, there's a lot of good in this, but we can't be short-sighted to not look at this full circle and see all the issues that could arise from it that are negative.
You probably agreed with everything.
Yeah, I agreed with everything said, but I'll just say this. The legalization, full legalization for recreational marijuana that's coming on this coming ballot for Florida, truly put $40 million behind it. I'm voting no on it. I'm voting no on, I said it right here, Christians for Cannabis founder, voting no on legalization because it's not going to include home grow, and it's going to just be the 22 companies. The way it's written to get amended and add licensees later is going to be very difficult, if not impossible. So we're better off just voting no. They have to get 60% of the vote.
But aren't there positives from marijuana? Sorry to interrupt. If it was put into play, though, isn't there going to be positives from that?
There is, but the only ones that would be able to sell it would be like corporate.
No, I get that position. I'm just saying, but isn't there still positives for society if at least it's out there being sold?
From a social aspect.
Is that more important than,
It's more important to stick with the hemp program and medical program the way that we have and just wait for a bill that actually benefits the people.
Okay.
Because the way that it is now is really corrupt and horrible.
Now we're going to go a little bit in a different direction here.
Let me just plug The Dignitary by Ian Beckles over there off of
Big Kava.
Big man, Ian Beckles. If you like Kava, what's the other one called? Kratom. You like Kava or Kratom? Ian Beckles over there. Check them out. The Dignitary. It's a good freaking spot, and we've been there. It's nice.
So there are two current wars right now that get a lot of heat, and you have different views on different sides. You have the Russia-Ukraine, and you have Israel against Palestine. What is your take on those wars, and should the government be funding proxy wars?
I guess it would depend on what your definition of a proxy war
is. So I
don't know if those qualify as proxy wars.
Well, when the U.S. sends money to Ukraine.
Yeah, they already have, yes.
Yeah. Are they sending money to Russia?
I don't know.
So they are funding Ukraine to fight a war against Russia. The United States is sending money to Israel to fund a war against Palestine, which is backed by Iran. Are they fighting a war against Iran? Yes. So call it my definition.
I'll take. What I want to know. So we're talking on the same base.
What are your views on that? Should the United States be spending money that could have been used to build a wall? Spending money
that won't work.
Spending money on proxy wars, in quotes, Sean's definition
of proxy war,
instead of spending money on its own citizens.
Well, I think it spends money on its own citizens. I don't think it spends enough money on its own citizens here back home. But here's two things that you have to make sure you understand about this. Number one is we all sitting in this room don't have the intelligence to understand. I don't mean the physical intelligence. I mean the material intelligence that the CIA or the other intelligence services are gathering every day.
I agree.
For us to be able to make the decisions to know why we're making those strategic steps as a country to put and allocate resources towards these different situations that are going on. So that's number one. I think we have to understand that, because it's easy to sit here and say we shouldn't be doing X for our own reasons when we have no idea about what's happening with NATO, what's happening with shadow governments, who's trying to overtake or overthrow certain other governments in other countries that we may not want or like. So the U.S. has, as you probably know, I don't want to go too back into a history lesson here, but the United States has meddled in other countries' elections,
Honduras,
right? Since the 50s and 60s.
So getting kickbacks.
They've
Contras.
done this, right? Exactly. They've done it in Nicaragua. They've done it elsewhere, right? But I think America has learned, and the world's accepted the fact that there has to be one indispensable nation, which is what the United States is, that says, look, at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones that set the parameters as to whether or not there's going to be control in the world at some point. Someone's got to take the lead and say, look, we understand that we're a democracy in the United States. We understand there's certain countries that have despots or other ways of rule that we don't agree with in the United States. We understand that you should be able to still live in the way that you want. But a lot of these countries, right, in our opinion, the United States are oppressive, right? Women aren't allowed to wear what they want to wear or dress the way they want to dress. Or there's other types of civil or human rights violations in different parts of the world. We hear about it like in China or other parts of the world, right? And so we have to, if we see wrong being done, step in some way to assist the world to have some type of order. And the question that you're asking, I think, is not from a proxy war perspective. It's more about when should we step into someone else's business if we believe it is our business or not. I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't think we're just writing blank checks. I think we're sending resources. You can count that as money, though. I mean, I've heard, if you watch any type of interview from the Pentagon or otherwise, they keep telling everybody, look, we're not just sending suitcases of cash over to these countries, right? We're either committing resources. You still have to spend money for them, though. So
Can
it's
you
not just
elaborate
cash.
on resources?
Yeah, so whether we send
Artillery,
food,
firearms?
could be, yeah, food, could be first aid, right? Medical supplies, all of these things are things that we're committing. They add up, right, as a line item in the column of budgets. But again, I don't think it's a negative thing for us to help a country if we align with them politically, if we have a strategic reason, whether we have missile sites, bases, or other geopolitical aspirations for growth in the future with certain nations, that we can support them. I mean, we've been doing it since the First World War, where we have pacts with countries that if there's a tax on some, that we're going to assist in some way.
NATO.
And I think it's smart for the government not to commit troops in these wars, which we're not doing right now, but we're helping in a different way. And so again, do I agree with you, to sum this up, that we spend too much money overseas? I do think we do, and we should be spending more back home, especially to fix infrastructure here. But I do think we have to be sensitive to the two things I started this conversation with. Are one, we don't have the actual intelligence that our services get for us to make the right rational decisions, to know whether they're making the wrong decisions on these allocations of resources. And number two, I do think we have geopolitical relationships that we do have to salvage. And I think there's a future, if you see the whole board playing chess, that, oh, there might be a reason to help Ukraine with aid. Or there might be a reason for the Israel-Palestine war to have a certain direction where the U.S. would like to see an outcome, because the Middle East tensions are never, right, singular and always in a good place. And so if we can do something to tip the scales towards good, I think the United States is going to do that. And I think that's their motivation for doing it. Deep down, I do believe that. So I hope
Nate,
that answers your question.
It did. Yeah. Nate, what do you think?
I mean, I don't really believe that America should be, Team America, World Police, policing all of the other countries and getting involved in all these wars, like Ukraine, for example. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that all of that money that they're sending to Ukraine, a percentage of that is getting kicked back into the pockets of whoever, whether that be Biden or whatever.
You got proof for that?
No, but it's just pretty obvious. They just keep printing money and they keep sending it. It's a racket. They're selling $90,000 washers. I mean, it's just allegedly, right? But if you watch that Putin interview that Tucker Carlson did, Putin said that Biden hasn't even called his office to attempt to negotiate or stop anything. And he's like, I'm open to it. So I think if Trump wins and he gets in, I think the Ukraine war will be settled and we'll be done with it in like 2 weeks
Do you
of
believe
him getting in
Putin?
office.
That what he said?
I don't think like Putin is like Mr. Perfect or anything like that, but he's definitely not what everyone else perceives him to be, especially when they actually watch his interview. I mean, like he went on for history for the last 800 years for the first 45 minutes of that interview. You know, imagine Biden doing that.
Probably couldn't.
Probably couldn't do that. I don't think
Unless
so.
the translator was fudged.
I'll tell you what, though, you make a good point
Yep.
because I think Putin's not what everybody thinks he is. I think he's definitely evil, though, in the
I mean, he's
deeper sense of the term. But I think he thinks that Russians have been misunderstood since the Second World War, and they've been put aside and not treated as a more serious nation. And as a result of that, I think they had to take steps they did. And he doesn't want to give up power, though.
We're
And
gonna
that's a problem.
we're gonna finish that thought because we're running down on time here. Let's finish that thought
Okay.
next segment.
You
Okay,
think they
okay.
have a chance
Then
to
let's just
win?
do it on the
That's-
podcast.
that's the
Oh yeah,
my
yeah.
point.
You got to finish your
See how
point.
they
That's the
rush
Hey,
us?
okay. Let's start now. All right. So Nate was wrapping up his point.
Yeah, I
Nate?
interrupted him. Sorry about that, Nate.
On the Ukraine war, the thing that I respect about Putin is he's a nationalist and he looks out for his own country and he doesn't play games with, and play ball with all these globalist deep state actors. So I actually respect that about the guy. But, that's all I have for Ukraine. Is for Israel. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. Like
Yeah, because I asked the question about both.
right.
Yeah, so you're
we sent-
addressing Israel finally.
we send all this money to Israel, and then the Christians act like the Zionist can do no wrong because they're God's chosen people. So we ignore all of their bad stuff and then demonize the Muslims when the only bad part of the Muslims is just the jihadist. So the reality is the Israel conflict is a conflict that dates back 6,000 years to when Abraham knocked up the maid, Hagar. Okay. And that bloodline was the Muhammad's bloodline 4,600 years later. And then the Isaac line was the Jew bloodline. So we don't even know what they're even fighting about anymore because it's gone on and on and on for the last 6,000 years. So I'm not the one, even though I'm an outspoken Christian, I don't just blindly take Israel's, side on everything. I understand that in that conflict, there's good and bad people on both sides. I think that we shouldn't probably be giving that much money to Israel, just like I said the same thing with Ukraine. But I agree with his point of, it's easy for us to sit back here and watch the news media and do our own research and be like, this is what we should do. Well, then if you get, I just imagine if you were to get into the White House president's office and on day one, they take you in the back room and they show you all this intelligence that we had no idea about that we can't release to the public. So it's more complicated than we're probably even capable of.
Oh yeah, I'm
fixing
pretty
because we
sure
don't have
that
all the information.
cocaine and hookers is really complicated in the White House room.
I don't know what else you're talking about.
What are you talking about? They found cocaine in the White House.
Hunter Biden.
Allegedly, or
Are
is
you
this
kidding
legit?
me?
Hunter
Come
Biden.
on, man.
Yeah, the Secret Service literally said they didn't know where it came from.
During the Clinton administration?
No,
No, during the Biden administration.
Well, definitely during that, and the George Bush.
There you go.
Steve, you said something off air that you said that you were going to say
Oh, I
about
just
Ukraine's relevance or something like that.
Well, I just think it's important. It goes to what Nate was just reaffirming that we.
Wow,
talked
this is
about
just a hand-holding circle of agreement up in this bitch, man.
Well, I just think rational minds will see things rationally, maybe.
But I
do
talk
know-
about something else.
I do know that.
Abortion.
I think it's. How much time I got? I do know that.
You got
I'm just
30
saying
minutes.
It's important not to lose sight of the fact that the United States. I talked about this earlier, and more broadly, but the United States committing resources to Ukraine has a strategic reason, right? You guys understand it's hard to sympathize with Putin on this, but it's hard not to at the same time. Putin feels like he's backed into a wall. They have no allies except for China and maybe India, right?
And all of
doesn't.
the EU for receiving their oil.
Well, doesn't mean that they're actually friends or they're going to be able to rely upon them. But also the oil tariffs are a different story that he can charge. But I will tell you this, because he's nationalized the oil there pretty much in Russia, is when he has nowhere else to turn and he feels like he's getting pushed back, Ukraine is actually a strategic area for the United States and NATO, because Ukraine right now is not a part of NATO, and most people don't realize that. They have the ability to join NATO, and they technically deep down probably want to. One of the negotiation points that was taking place during the Ukraine-Russian war is that they wanted a commitment from Ukraine that they wouldn't join NATO, or at least over a certain period of time. I heard Ukraine actually partially agreed to it, but it wasn't the period of time that Russia would have wanted. And so Russia wants to take that land strategically, because Russia knows that as soon as the Ukraine joins NATO, now right in Russia's backyard could be missile systems that they already have in Turkey set up pointing at Russia that weren't supposed to be there, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, that once Russia not being a part of NATO, now having more, less allies, I should say, around them geopolitically, they know that they're vulnerable to attacks, and they know that they have no other allies or neighbors that can help them anymore. So they liked Ukraine being independent, not a part of NATO, because then those lands can't be utilized by NATO countries like the United States to take aim or to create suppression or scaring the Russia, that if they take one move that the US or NATO doesn't like, that they have you boxed into a corner. And so they need space, is basically what Putin's argument has been over time. That's why he wanted to annex Crimea as well, and why he's taking the same position here. So I just think it's important to understand that you have to look at both sides of it. Do you think that Putin has a valid reason for pushing back and wanting Ukraine to stay free of NATO? But the United States also thinks that, we strategically need this area. It's important for the Ukraine to come into NATO because the U.S. is in NATO. The U.S.'s allies are in NATO. And then we as one can kind of overpower everybody else if there's a disruption into the world order. And so I just think it's important, before you start talking about allocating resources and expenditures, that you understand the geopolitical strategies and problems that are faced by this war, and understanding why there may be a need for resources for us to do that, or commit them.
Yeah.
So now let's pivot.
So we're going to be there forever, because there's no way that you actually personally think Ukraine is going to beat Russia.
I didn't think Ukraine would last this long, so I truly don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think Ukraine can wait them out if we stop our aid.
Yeah.
So that's a decision we have to make. That's a good point.
Let's pivot to something totally different here. Let's talk about oil. The first thing Biden did in office was he closed down the Keystone Pipeline. A lot of people attribute inflation to that exact reason why it costs so much to go to the grocery store, because it costs more for shipping, more for freight, more for, cargo ships crossing the Pacific or transatlantic. And they're saying that was a bad move. And I forgot who got the first.
He gets the next.
Yeah, he gets the next.
And a lot of people are saying that's a bad move. And it was a bad move, is what they're saying on the right. Mm-hmm. Nate, what is your feelings on whether that contributed to inflation or not, or if it was a good move to do on his administration?
I think it definitely contributed to inflation, but more so, it's like $3.50 gas prices, $4 here in Florida, was like $6 or $7 in California, something like that. And when Biden, he did that on day one, shut off the Keystone Pipeline, it's like, it just kind of makes sense to me that just because of supply and demand that the price would go up. I remember when that happened, the press secretary, what's her face?
The redhead. I forget her name.
The black LGBTQ.
Saki.
No, Saki used to be. She was right. Yeah. She's out now.
The LGBT.
No, yeah, that's when it happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, she was.
Jen Psaki's. Yeah. Jen Psaki's, yeah.
So she was just denying it, saying that doesn't cause that. And I think that we have to certainly do something to get our gas prices down. If we reopen up the Keystone Pipeline on day one, when Trump gets in office, which probably I would assume he would probably do something like that, it will be interesting to see if the gas goes back down or how much it will go down.
So you're sure he's going to win?
Yeah.
And he won't be
it's fixed.
Whoa, no. Don't say this now.
And the other thing is,
now, what is your take on that, on the closure of the Keystone Pipeline? I think it was like 4,500 jobs were lost immediately. Or
I thought it was more than that.
45,000 or something like that.
It was 200.
I don't know if it was closed. I heard it was suspended, but I do.
Which means it's no longer being built.
Means it can be reactivated.
Yeah,
not completely
by another
forever.
Administration.
Maybe on this one. I mean, do I think it was a good idea? I don't know the information as to why they do it, but I've read some of the reasons why. I know one of it was they wanted to tap the SPR for a while to see how much we could live off of our own supply. And they thought that was going to help offset not getting oil from Russia when the Ukraine crisis started. When they found out that that wasn't going to be the case and oil was going to be more expensive because the Middle East was going to use that as a reason to raise prices from us if we couldn't get it from Russia, we realized we couldn't just rely on the SPR. So now
I just want to stop you real quick. So when you say we, are you saying that
United States.
the United States?
Yeah.
That's the kind of intelligence that they're getting? They don't know if they shut down oil supply lines that oil will go up?
Well, I preface my answer saying I don't know all the information that they use to make that decision. All I know is I've read some of the information that I just relayed to you.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't know if that was a political move. I know the U.S. doesn't want to cost people jobs, doesn't help you in an election. I think where it's located, they're probably not worried about that electorate in that state, but they should be, because I think it's up near the Dakotas, right?
What,
I'm not
Alaska?
And Canada.
It
No,
cuts through Alaska, Canada,
and
then
it goes all the way through Canada
yeah.
and comes through the Dakotas as well. and
through
then
the
heads up.
Midwest, through PA.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, we're not worried about Canada.
So
No, but that's not the fucking point.
that's not the point. So my whole point is I don't want to say it's just a political reason why they did. There had to be more of a strategic one, like the example I gave you about using the SPR or thinking they could get oil cheaper elsewhere, right? And so again, I don't know if there was a reason because I thought Obama was all for it, the pipeline, right? And so if that happened under his administration and him and Biden seem to be aligned on most things, I don't know why Biden would have shut down. So there's a reason why I don't know. And again, I don't know if that single act caused inflation. All I know is that single act raised gas prices. So I don't have an answer for you to say for sure if that caused inflation. But I do know is that I can't tell you for sure if it was a smart, right, strategic reason for doing it because I don't have all the information as to why they would have done it overseas. All I know is it didn't help with gas prices and Americans aren't happy about it.
God, man, that was a very political answer.
Well, I mean,
right
but
there.
you would say,
True answer. It's my personal
but you would
feeling.
say not only gas
I didn't
prices,
prep for this debate.
but it's overall operating costs. So I mean, besides gas, I mean, they're going to inflate the goods more because now it costs more for gas.
yeah.
So it's pretty much every
Well, the
line.
price of
item.
That's a
everything
trickle
is
up
gone.
Yeah.
effect. That's
Yeah.
a trickle
Well, yeah,
up
I mean, the
effect.
grocery store, the cost of products is more expensive now.
Yeah.
Everything's gone up. So I just don't think you can attribute all just to oil. But maybe you can. I think
that's part of it.
I'm not
I
an
don't think
economist.
it's-
No,
I can't
I
say.
mean, part of
Yeah.
it, yeah, for sure.
Now there was a big issue when Trump made Space Force, okay? And a lot of people said, "Hey, why would they have Space Force? All this stuff." They were really against it or making fun of them. And Space Force has actually now grown since its inception. Do you think that putting a man on the moon is and should be a priority of NASA?
We already did it though, 1969, right?
That was a Hollywood
Didn't
movie.
happen. Oh, is that what?
And what do you think the ramifications are of getting a permanent moon base on the moon? And why would the government be spending so much money on this kind of task?
I have a couple answers to that. So number one is we already went to the moon,
Yeah, I remember.
and
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
And
Allegedly.
I like
I like how
that.
the flag is waving.
I know. I love
Did you
that.
see all the lights set up?
Well, they put wires in the flag.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why they did that, to give it that effect.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important that we explore. I think the two biggest threats for wars in the future, one can involve space and space weaponry. And two, I think it also involves the threats from technology and infrastructure with hacking and those types of things through data and technology. Now, I think it's important to continue to explore space because we've learned from the 1960s that our capabilities and limitations from what's capable need to be improved. So we learned about improvements that we can make technologically, but there was a lot of, I guess you could say unintended consequences, but they're positive, where we learned a lot about technologies that we never would have thought of that came out of the space race. And so today, as we continue to commit and explore towards whether the United States needs to have an alternative location to continue human life in the event that something happens, whether we need to continue to develop space weaponry for defense to protect ourselves, and the Space Force manages and oversees that, whether we need to continue space exploration to maintain our satellites that helps us get the weather and tracking and other things and GPS location. To me, those things are essential. Whether they're taking it out of the government and creating a different line item and a different sector to handle it, that could be one reason. There could be strategic reasons where they're worried about something and planning for the future, which is what the U.S. has always done, and continue to be innovative technologically and militarily. And so I think all those things are necessary and important. I see no downside to doing that. Again, I don't know if there's another space battle or race that we're preparing to fight, but I think we have to prepare for the possibility of one. I think that the U.S. is being proactive in that regard.
What is your take on the subject?
There was recently a government official, like 6 months or a year back, that spoke under oath, either the Congress or Senate or somewhere, and he said that they had recovered 2 alien bodies. Did you guys hear about that?
I did.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
There's pictures.
Well, if he's under oath, then it's definitely true.
Exactly.
So I think that, maybe space exploration should be brought to the private sector, because how much is NASA spending of our tax money? I don't even know what it is, but it's a lot.
Their budget's been slashed
SpaceX.
During Obama, but then during Trump, it was re-raised, and Biden hasn't touched it.
SpaceX, the free market, private sector, they skate circles around NASA on like 1/100th of a budget. So I think that, maybe making sure that we're not spending too much money going to space. But, who knows? In 100 years, it might be Star Wars. We might be walking with the aliens, and then they'll be like racist against aliens. They'll be like, aliens' life matters. It'll be funded by Soros.
Wow. Soros will be here. I think Soros won't die.
It'll be just like Star Wars.
He's not going anywhere. I mean, I think
I like that.
I think DARPA and other types of government, that aren't as popular institutions really handle a lot of that work. I don't think NASA's doing a lot of that.
Well, NASA just signed a contract with 9 separate private companies where they're paying those 9 separate private companies $300,000. So, I mean, it's not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but still $300,000. Right, and they charter SpaceX flights. Yeah. They pay for Blue Origin. Yeah. They pay all, and now Blue Origin, which is a NASA funded launch. Blue Origin is a private company, but NASA is funding the launch to send 6 astronauts up to the ISS. Well, which has already happened. Yeah. So NASA is still paying these private companies.
Yeah, but NASA gets the benefit of the technology.
And it's cheaper than if NASA did it.
What happens up there, Blue Origin can't keep that. It's like work's made for hire.
I didn't, so allegedly, because I didn't see their contract. I'm
telling you, I guarantee you that's what they did.
Oh, yeah, because it's public and they're being hired as subcontractors. Well, like Lockheed Martin.
Well, they don't have to.
You know everything Lockheed Martin is doing?
I do know Lockheed Martin.
No, do you know everything they're doing?
Do I know everything they're doing? I do not know everything they're doing.
Exactly. And the public will never know because you need classifications in order to have
for a government like
access to that information.
Arm like NASA, same thing. Yeah. They're government funded.
So we're coming down to 2 minutes and 57 seconds. You guys want to close out? Anything you want to say, Trump or Biden?
Oh, it's going down. Yeah, go ahead, take this one, Nate. I know where you stand.
I mean,
you think Trump's got it locked in?
I'm going to vote for Trump. I voted for Trump in the last 2 elections. I like basically everything he did, except when he started to become a vaccine salesperson. I wasn't thrilled with that, but I think he's going to win because, like, when I talk to normal Trump supporters, and then I'm like, "So what do you think about all this legal stuff?" And they're like, "That just makes me want to vote for him more." And then, meanwhile, on the other side, when you talk to lefties,
my point over here,
the fact that the Biden administration is an embarrassment because he's so old and mentally challenged. And people want to vote for a lefty, but then they go and pump their gas and they look at the prices. And I'm not saying they're going to vote for Trump, but they're probably just going to stay home or vote for Kennedy. Kennedy will probably take more votes away from Biden than he does from Trump. So I just don't see how he's going to lose unless they cheat again.
And your take?
I think I'm going to be surprised with Steve's response.
I don't think they cheated, but I don't know who I'm voting for yet. I never make that decision this early. I think there's a lot more that has to play out, and we're waiting for an election. It's going to happen in November, in second day of May. So I'm going to obviously see how things go. I just think it's important to make that decision, at least for me, and I think a lot of Americans will probably feel the same way, is that you want to focus on someone that's going to, put the Constitution first and make sure that the future of the country is what's important, not the, ideals of maybe a single person or maybe not the ideals of a select few. And they look at America as a whole. Whoever that leader is on either side, I think the Democrats could still change the leadership opportunity before the election happens at the convention. We don't know.
So if they swap,
I think that'll be interesting.
So if they pull Biden and put in Big Mike, are you going to vote for her?
Who's Big Mike?
Michelle Obama.
Depends on what her platform would be, but all I know is that's what I'm going to be looking at. Obviously, I'm not a single issue voter. I'm not a single party voter.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I like to just look and see, what's the direction of the country going? What does it need? And who's the best candidate that can deliver that with a certain vision that puts the Constitution first? I think that's what matters. I don't know if we've, narrowed that down yet.
And that's going to do it.
Thank you for tuning in to TNN and Box News. We really appreciate you tuning in to this debate, even though it was kind of neutral, I would say overall. And Steve Fantetti is going to vote for Trump. Bye.